with a snap, the air whistling. The grumbling cut off, and the light fell. The group scrambled forward to find Koteran down on the ground, eyes staring up glassily, the arrow through his chest. His lantern burned fitfully on the ground beside him. Jonath retrieved his arrow, then wiped it on the dead man's clothing. "That's why I still carry a bow, you bloody son of a goat." "Here," Amaran said, pointing at a thick door. "Koteran was guarding it." "Prepare yourselves," Andral whispered, then shoved open the thick wooden door. Beyond, they found a line of crude cells built into the earthen wall, each one little more than a roofed cubbyhole, burrowed into the earth, with a door set in the opening. Pavara peeked in one, which was empty. The cubby didn't have enough room for a man to stand up inside, and the room was unlit. Being locked in those cells would mean being trapped in darkness, squeezed into a space like a grave. "Light," Nalam said. "Andral, he's in here. It's Logain." The others hurried to join him, and Andral picked the door's lock with a surprisingly adept hand. They pulled open the cell door, and Logain rolled out with a groan. He looked horrible, covered in grime. Once that curling dark hair and strong face might have made him handsome, he looked as weak as a beggar. He coughed, then rose to his knees with Nalam's help. Andral knelt immediately, but not in reverence. He looked Logain in the eyes as Imaran gave the Ashaman leader his flask for a drink. "Well?" Pavara asked. "It's him," Andral thought, a wave of relief coming through the bond. "It's still him." "They'd have let him go if they'd turned him," Pavara sent back, growing increasingly comfortable with this method of communicating. "Maybe, unless this is a trap." "My Lord Logain." "Andral." Logain's voice was raspy. "Jonath. Nalam. And an Aes Sedai?" He inspected Pavara. For a man who had apparently suffered days, perhaps weeks of incarceration, he looked remarkably lucid. "I remember you. What Aja are you, woman?" "Does it matter?" she replied.
"Oh, shit."
"Greatly," Logain said, trying to stand. He was too weak, and Nalam had to support him. "How did you find me?" "That is a story for once we are safe, my lord," Andral said. He peeked out the doorway. "Let's move. We still have a difficult night ahead of us." Andral froze, then slammed the door. "What is it?" Pavara asked. "Channeling," Jonath said. "Powerful." Yells, muffled by the door and the dirt walls, sounded outside in the hallway. "Someone found the guards," Imaran said. "My Lord Logain, can you fight?" Logain tried to stand on his own, then sagged again. His face grew determined, but Pavara felt Andral's disappointment. Logain had been given fork root. Either that or he was simply too tired to channel. Not surprising, Pavara had seen women in better shape than this, who were too worn out to embrace the source. "Back!" Andral shouted, stepping to the side of the door against the earthen wall. The door exploded in a weave of fire and destruction. Pavara didn't wait for the debris to settle. She wove fire and released a column of destruction down the corridor beyond. She knew she was facing dark friends, or worse. The three oaths did not hinder her here. She heard shouts, but something deflected the fire. Immediately, a shield tried to slam between her and the source. She fought it off barely and ducked to the side, breathing deeply. "Whoever it is, they're strong," Pavara said. A voice called orders distantly, echoing in the tunnels. Jonath knelt down beside her, bow out. "Light, that's Taim's voice." "We cannot stand here," Logain said. "Andral, a gateway." "I'm trying," Andral said. "Light, I'm trying." "Bah!" Naylan set Logain down beside the wall. I've been in tighter spots before. He joined the others at the doorway, flinging weaves down the corridor. Blasts shook the sidewalls and dirt rained down from the roof above. Pavara jumped in front of the doorway, releasing a weave, then knelt down beside Andral. He stared ahead, not seeing, face a mask of concentration. She could feel determination and frustration pulsing through the bond. She took his hand. You can do it, she whispered. The doorway erupted, and Jonathan fell back, arm burned. The ground trembled. The walls started to break apart. Sweat dripped down the sides of Andral's face. He gritted his teeth, his face going red, eyes opening wide. Smoke poured through the doorway, making Amaran cough as Naylan healed Jonathan. Andral yelled, and he neared the top of that wall in his mind. He was almost there. He could... A weave thumped against the room, a ripple in the earth, and the strained roof finally gave out. Earth poured down atop them, and all went black.
Chapter 5. To Require a Boon. Randall Thor awoke and drew in a deep breath. He slipped from the blankets in his tent, leaving Avienda slumbering there, and threw on a robe. The air smelled wet. He was reminded, in passing, of mornings during his youth, rising before dawn to milk the cow, which would need milking twice a day. Eyes closed, he remembered the sounds of Tam, already up, cutting new fence posts in the barn, remembering the chilly air, stumping his feet into his boots, washing his face with water left to warm beside the stove. On any morning, a farmer could open his door and look out on a world that was still new. Crisp frost, the first tentative calls of birds, sunlight breaking the horizon, like the morning yawn of the world. Rand stepped up to the flaps of his tent and drew them back, nodding to Katarin, a short golden-haired maiden who was on guard. He looked out on a world that was far from new. This world was old and tired, like a peddler who had been to the spine of the world and back on foot. Tents crowded the field of Marilor, cook fires trailing pillars of smoke toward the still dark morning sky. Everywhere men worked. Soldiers oiled armor, smiths sharpened spearheads, women prepared feathers for fletching arrows. Breakfasts were served from meal wagons to men who should have slept better than they had. Everyone knew these were their last moments before the storm arrived. Rand closed his eyes. He could feel it, the land itself, like a faint water bond. Beneath his feet, grubs crawled through the soil. The roots of the grasses continued to spread ever so slowly, seeking nutrients. The skeletal trees were not dead, for water seeped through them. They slumbered. Bluebirds clustered in a nearby tree. They did not call out with the arrival of dawn. They huddled together as if for warmth.
Nice.
The land still lived. It lived like a man clinging to the edge of a cliff by his fingertips. Rand opened his eyes. Have my clerks returned from Tyr? Yes, Randall Thor, said Katarin. Send word to the other rulers, Rand said. I will meet with them in 1 hour at the center of the field where I commanded no tents be placed. Katarin went off to relay his command, leaving 3 other maidens nearby to guard. Rand let the tent flaps close in front of him and turned around, then jumped as he found Avienda, as bare as the day she'd been born, standing in the tent. It is very difficult to sneak up on you, Randall Thor, she announced with a smile. The bond gives you too much of an advantage. I have to move very slowly, like a lizard at midnight, so that your sense of where I am does not change too quickly. Right, Avienda. Why do you need to sneak up on me in the first place? Or this, she said, then jumped forward, snatching his head and kissing him, her body pressed against his. He relaxed, letting the kiss linger. Unsurprisingly, he mumbled around her lips, This is much more fun now that I don't have to worry about freezing my bits off while doing
Nice.
it. Abienda pulled back. You should not speak of that event, Randolph Thor. But my toll is paid, and I am now first sister to Elaine. Do not remind me of a shame that is forgotten. Shame? Why would she be ashamed of that when just now? He shook his head. He could hear the land breathing, could sense a beetle on a leaf half a league away. But sometimes he could not fathom Aiel. Or maybe it was just women. In this case, it was probably both. Abienda hesitated beside the tense barrel of fresh water. I suppose that we will not have time for a bath. Oh, you like baths now? I have accepted them as a part of life, she said. If I'm going to live in the wetlands, then I will adopt some wetlander customs, when they are not foolish. Her tone indicated that most of them were. What's wrong? Rand asked, stepping up to her. Wrong? Something bothers you, Abienda. I can see it in you, feel it in you. She looked him over with a critical eye. Light, but she was beautiful. You were much easier to manage before you received the ancient wisdom of your former self, Randolph Thor. I was, he asked, smiling. You didn't act that way at the time. That was when I was as a new child, inexperienced in Randolph Thor's boundless capacity to be frustrating. She dipped her hands into the water and washed her face. It is well. If I had known some of what was to come with you, I might have put on the white and never removed it. He smiled, then channeled, weaving water and drawing the liquid from the barrel in a stream. Abienda stepped back, watching with curiosity. You no longer seemed bothered by the idea of a man channeling, he noted as he fanned the water out into the air and heated it with a thread of fire. There is no longer a reason to be bothered. If I were to be uncomfortable with you channeling, I would be behaving like a man refusing to forget a woman's shame after her toe has been met. She eyed him. I can't imagine anyone being that crass, he said, tossing aside his robe and stepping up to her. Here, this is a relic from that ancient wisdom you apparently find so frustrating. He brought the water in, warmed perfectly, and shattered it into a thick misting spray that wove about them in a rush. Abienda gasped, clutching his arm. She might be growing more comfortable with wetlander ways, but water still made her both uncomfortable and reverent. Rand snatched some soap with air and shaved it into part of the mix of water, sending a spinning whirl of bubbles around them, swirling up their bodies and pulling their hair into the air, twisting Abienda's about like a column before dropping it back lightly to her shoulders. He used another wave of warm air to remove the soap, then pulled most of the wetness away, leaving them damp but not soaked. He dumped the water back into the barrel and, with a hint of reluctance, released Sayadine. Abienda was panting. That was completely crack-brained and irresponsible. Thank you, he said, fetching a towel and tossing it to her. You would consider most of what we did during the Age of Legends to be crack-brained and irresponsible. That was a different time, Abienda. There were many more channelers, and we were trained from a young age. We didn't need to know things like warfare or how to kill. We had eliminated pain, hunger, suffering, war. Instead, we used the one power for things that might seem common. You'd only assumed that you'd eliminated war, Abienda said with a sniff. You were wrong. Your ignorance left you weak. It did. I can't decide if I would have changed things, though. There were many good years, good decades, good centuries. We believed we were living in paradise. Perhaps that was our downfall. We wanted our lives to be perfect, so we ignored imperfections. Problems were magnified through inattention, and war might have become inevitable if the boar hadn't ever been made. He toweled himself dry. Rand, Avienda said, stepping up to him. Today I will require a boon. She laid her hand on his arm. The skin of her hand was rough, calloused from her days as a maiden. Avienda would never be a milk-softened lady like those from the courts of Kyrian and Tyr. Rand liked that just fine. Hers were hands that had known work. What boon? He asked. I'm not certain I could deny you anything today, Avienda. I'm not yet certain what it will be. I don't understand. You needn't understand, she said, and you needn't promise me you will agree. I felt I needed to give you warning, as one does not ambush a lover. My boon will require you to change your plans, perhaps in a drastic way, and it will be important. All right. She nodded, as mystifying as ever, and began gathering up her clothing to dress for the day.
Egwene strode around a frozen pillar of glass in her dream. It almost looked like a column of light. What did it mean? She could not interpret it. The vision changed, and she found a sphere. The world, she knew somehow, cracking. Frantic, she tied it with cords, striving to hold it together. She could keep it from breaking, but it took so much effort. She faded from the dream and started awake. She embraced the source immediately and wove a light. Where was she? She was wearing a nightgown and lying in bed back in the White Tower. Not her own rooms, which were still in disrepair following the assassin's attack. Her study had a small sleeping chamber, and she'd bedded down in that. Her head pounded. She could vaguely remember growing bleary-eyed the night before, listening in her tent at the field of Merilor to reports of Caemlyn's fall. At some point during the late hours of the night, Gawain had insisted that Nynaeve make a gateway back to the White Tower so Egwene could sleep in a bed rather than on a pallet on the ground. She grumbled to herself, rising. He'd probably been right, though she could remember feeling distinctly annoyed at his tone. Nobody had corrected him on it, not even Nynaeve. She rubbed at her temples. The headache wasn't as bad as those she'd had when Halima had been caring for her, but it did hurt mightily. Undoubtedly, her body was expressing displeasure at the lack of sleep she'd given it in recent weeks. A short time later, dressed, washed, and feeling a little better, she left her rooms to find Gawain sitting at Sylviana's desk, looking over a report, ignoring a novice who was lingering near the doorway. She'd hang you out the window by your toes if she saw you doing that, Egwene said dryly. Gawain jumped. It's not a report from her stack, he protested. It's the latest news from my sister about Caemlyn. It came by gateway for you just a few minutes ago.
Dab time.
And you're reading it? He blushed. Burn me, Egwene. It's my home. It wasn't sealed. I thought... It's all right, Gawain, she said with a sigh. Let's see what it says. There's not much, he said with a grimace, handing it to her. At a nod from him, the novice scurried away. A short time later, the girl came back with a tray of wizened bell fruit, bread, and a pitcher of milk. Egwene sat down at her desk in the study to eat, feeling guilty as the novice left. The bulk of the tower's Aes Sedai and soldiers camped in tents on the field of Merilor, while she dined on fruit, no matter how old, and slept in a comfortable bed. Still, Gawain's arguments had made sense. If everyone thought she was in her tent on the field, then potential killers would strike there. After her near death at the hands of the Shan assassins, she was willing to accept a few extra precautions, particularly those that helped her get a good night's sleep. That Shan woman, Egwene said, staring into her cup. The one with the Ileana.
Break his roaches up a little bit.
Did you speak with her? He nodded. I have some tower guards watching the pair. Nynaeve vouched for them, in a way. In a way? She called the woman several variations of wool-headed, but said she probably wouldn't do you any intentional harm. Wonderful. Well, Egwene could make use of a Shan-Chan who was willing to talk. Light. What if she had to fight them and the Trollocs at the same time? You didn't take your own advice, she said, noting Gawain's red eyes as he sat down in the chair in front of her desk. Someone had to watch the door, he said. Calling for guards would have let everyone know that you were not at the field. She took a bite of her bread. What had it been made of? And looked over the report. He was right, but she didn't like the idea of him going without sleep on a day like this. The warder bond would only help him so far. So the city is truly gone, she said. Walls breached, palace seized. The Trollocs didn't burn all of the city, I see. Much of it, but not all. Yes, Gawain said. But it is obvious that Caemlyn is lost. She felt his tension through the bond. I'm sorry. Many people escaped, but it's hard to say what the city population was before the attack with so many refugees. Hundreds of thousands are likely dead. Egwene breathed out. A large army's worth of people wiped out in one night. That was probably only the start of the brutality to come. How many had died in Kandor so far? They could only guess. Caemlyn had held much of the Andorran army's food supply. She felt sick, thinking of so many people, hundreds and thousands of them, stumbling across the landscape away from the burning city. Yet that thought was less terrifying than the risk of starvation to Elaine's troops. She drew up a note to Silviana, requiring her to send all sisters strong enough to provide healing for the refugees and gateways to carry them to Whitebridge. Perhaps she could deliver supplies there, though the White Tower was strained as it was. Did you see the note at the bottom? Gawain asked. She had not. She frowned, then scanned a sentence added at the bottom in Silviana's hand. Rand al'Thor had demanded that everyone meet with him by... She looked up at the room's old, freestanding wooden clock. The meeting was in a half hour. She groaned, then began shoveling the rest of her breakfast into her mouth. It wasn't dignified, but light burned her if she was going to meet with Rand on an empty stomach. I'm going to throttle that boy, she said, wiping her face. Come on, let's move. We could always be last, Gawain said, rising. Show him he doesn't order us about. And allow him the chance to meet with everyone else while I'm not there to counter what he has to say? I don't like it, but Rand holds the reins right now. Everyone's too curious to see what he's going to do. She made a gateway back to her tent, into the corner that she'd set aside for traveling. She and Gawain stepped through and left the tent, into the clamor of the field of Merilor. People shouted outside, with a distant thunder of hooves. Troops cantered and galloped as they took positions for the meeting. Did Rand realize what he'd done here? Putting soldiers together like this, leaving them edgy and uncertain, was like tossing a handful of fireworks into a stew pot and setting it onto the stove. Eventually, things were going to start exploding. Egwene needed to manage the chaos. She strode out of her tent, Gawain a step behind and to her left, and smoothed her face. The world needed an Amyrlin. Silviana waited outside, dressed formally with stole and staff, as if she were going to a meeting of the Hall of the Tower. See to this, once the meeting starts, Egwene said, handing her the note. Yes, Mother, the woman said, then fell into step just behind Egwene and to her right. Egwene didn't need to look to know that Silviana and Gawain were pointedly ignoring each other. At the west side of her camp, Egwene found a cluster of Aes Sedai arguing with one another. She passed through them and pulled silence in her wake. A groom brought her horse, Sifter, a testy, dappled gelding, and as she mounted, she looked at the Aes Sedai. Sitters only. That produced a sea of calm, orderly complaints, each made with an Aes Sedai sense of authority. Each woman thought she had a right to be at the meeting. Egwene stared at them, and the women slowly came into line. They were Aes Sedai. They knew that squabbling was beneath them. The sitters gathered, and Egwene looked out over the field of Merilor as she waited. It was a large triangular area of Shinaran grassland, bounded on two sides by converging rivers, the Mora and the Aranin, and on the other by woods. The grass was broken by Dashar Knob, a rocky outcrop about 100 feet high with cliff walls, and on the Arafellan side of the Mora by Polov Heights, a flat-topped hill about 40
Got 'em
feet
all
high,
broken up.
with
Elisa.
gradual slopes on three sides and a steeper slope on the riverside. Southwest of
I'll be
Polov
right
Heights
back. I
lay an
gotta go
area of bogs,
wash my hands real
and
quick.
nearby
And
the River Mora's
then we'll take a
shallows,
dab.
known as Hawal Ford, a convenient crossing place between Arafel and Shinar. There was an Ogier steading nearby, opposite some old stone ruins to the north. Egwene had paid her respects soon after arriving, but Rand had not invited the Ogier to his meeting. Armies were converging. Borderlander flags came in from the west, where Rand had made his camp. Perrin's own flag flew among those. Odd that Perrin should have a flag. From the south, Elaine's procession wound its way toward the meeting place, smack in the middle of the field. The queen rode at the front. Her palace had burned, but she kept her eyes forward. Between Perrin and Elaine, the Tyrans and Ilianers, light. Who had let those armies camp so near one another, marched in separate columns, both bringing almost their entire forces? Best to be quick. Her presence would calm the rulers, perhaps prevent problems. They wouldn't like being near so many Aiel. Each clan but the Shido was represented. She still didn't know if they'd support Rand or her. Some of the wise ones seemed to have listened to Egwene's pleas, but she had received no commitments. "Look there," Saorin said, pulling up beside Egwene. "Did you invite the sea folk?" Egwene shook her head. "No. I thought there was little chance they'd side against Rand." In truth, after her meeting with the Windfinders in Talaran-Riad, she hadn't wanted to swim in negotiations with them again. She was afraid she'd wake up and find that she'd traded away not only her firstborn, but the White Tower itself. They put up quite a show, appearing through gateways near Rand's camp, wearing their colorful clothing, wave mistresses and sword masters as proud as monarchs. Light, Egwene thought. I wonder how long it's been since a meeting of this scale occurred. Nearly every nation was represented, and then some, considering the Sea Folk and the Aiel. Only Murundi, Arad Doman, and the Shanchan-held lands were missing. The last of the sitters finally mounted and pulled up beside her. Eager to move forward, but not daring to show it, Egwene started a slow ride toward the meeting place. Bryn's soldiers fell in and formed an escort of tromping boots and pikes held high. Their white tabards were emblazoned with the flame of Tarvalon, but they did not outshine the Aes Sedai. The way they marched accented the women at their center. Other armies relied on the strength of arms. The White Tower had something better. Each army converged on the meeting place, the center of the field, where Rand had ordered no tents erected. So many armies together on ground perfect for a charge. This had better not go wrong. Elaine set precedent by leaving the vast bulk of her force halfway there, continuing on with a smaller guard of about 100 men. Egwene did the same. Other leaders began to trickle forward, their retinues coming to rest in a large ring around the central field. Sunlight shone down upon Egwene as she approached the center. She couldn't help but notice the large, perfectly broken circle of clouds above the field. Rand did affect things in strange ways. He needed no announcement to say that he was in attendance, no banner. The clouds pulled back, and sunlight shone down when he was near. It did not seem that he'd arrived at the center yet, however. She met up with Elaine. "Elaine, I'm sorry," she said. "Not for the first time." The golden-haired woman kept her eyes forward. The city is lost, but the city is not the nation. We must have this meeting, but do so quickly so that I can return to Andor. Where is Rand? Taking his time, Egwene said. He's always been like that. I have spoken to Avienda, Elaine said, her bay horse shifting and snorting. She spent last night with him, but he wouldn't tell her what he intends this day. He has mentioned demands, Egwene said, watching the rulers gather with their retinues. Darlin Cisnera, King of Tyr, was first. He would support her, for all the fact that he owed Rand his crown. The Shanshan threat still bothered him deeply. The middle-aged man with a dark pointed beard was not particularly handsome, but self-composed and sure of himself. He bowed from horseback to Egwene, and she held out her ring. He hesitated, then dismounted and came forward, bowing his head and kissing the ring. The light illumine you, mother. I'm glad to see you here, darling. So long as your promise holds. Gateways to my homeland, should the moment require. It will be done. He bowed again, eyeing a man riding up toward Egwene from the other side. Gregorin, steward of Ilion, was Darlin's equal in many ways, but not all. Rand had named Darlin steward of Tyr, but the High Lords had asked for him to be crowned king. Gregorin remained merely a steward. The tall man had lost weight recently, his round face with its customary Illianer beard starting to look sunken. He didn't wait for Egwene to prod him. He swung from his horse and seized her hand, executing a flourishing bow and a kiss to the ring. I'm pleased the two of you could put aside differences to join me in this endeavor, Egwene said, drawing their attention away from glares at one another. The Lord Dragon's intentions are troubling, Darlin said. He chose me to lead Tyr because I opposed him when I felt it necessary. I believe he will listen to reason if I present it to him. Gregorin snorted. The Lord Dragon do be perfectly reasonable. We do need to offer a good argument, and I do think he will listen. My keeper has some words for each of you, Egwene said. Please listen to what she has to say. Your cooperation will be remembered. Sylviana rode forward and drew Gregorin aside to speak to him. There wasn't much of importance to say, but Egwene had feared these two would end up chipping at one another. Sylviana's instruction was to keep them apart. Darlin regarded her with a discerning gaze. He seemed to understand what she was doing, but didn't complain as he mounted his horse. You seem troubled, King Darlin, she said. Some old rivalries run deeper than the ocean's depths, Mother. I can almost wonder if this meeting was the work of the Dark One, hoping that we would end up destroying one another and doing his work for him. I understand, Egwene said. Perhaps it would be best if you advised your men, again, if you've already done so, that there are to be no accidents this day. A wise suggestion. He bowed, pulling back. They were both with her, as was Elaine. Gildan would stand for Rand if what Elaine said about Queen Alejandra was true. Gildan wasn't so powerful that Alejandra worried her. The Borderlanders were another matter. Rand seemed to have won them over. Each of their flags flew over their respective armies, and each ruler was in attendance, save Queen Atheniella, who was in Kandor trying to organize the refugees fleeing her homeland. She had left a sizable contingent for this meeting, including Antal, her eldest son, as if to state that what happened here was as important to Kandor's survival as fighting on the border. Kandor, the first casualty of the last battle. The entire country was said to be aflame. Would Andor be next? The Two Rivers? Steady, Egwene thought. It felt awful to have to consider who was for whom. but it was her duty to do so. Rand could not direct the last battle personally, as he would undoubtedly wish to do. His mission would be to fight the Dark One. He would have neither the presence of mind nor the time to act as a commanding general as well. She intended to come from this meeting with the White Tower acknowledged as leading the collected forces against the Shadow, and she would not give up responsibility for the seals. How much could she trust this man Rand had become? He wasn't the Rand she'd grown up with. He was more akin to the Rand she'd come to know out in the Aiel Waste, only more confident, and perhaps more cunning. He had grown quite proficient at the game of houses. None of these changes in him were terrible things, assuming he could still be reasoned with. Is that the flag of Arad Doman? She thought, surprised. It wasn't just the flag. It was the king's flag, indicating he was riding with those forces that had just arrived on the field. Had Rodel Iteralda finally ascended to the throne, or had Rand picked someone else? The Damani king's flag flew next to that of Davram Bashir, uncle to the Queen of Saldeia. Light. Gawain nudged his horse up beside hers. That flag. I see it, Egwene said. I'll have to pin down Swan. Have her sources mentioned who took the throne? I was afraid the Damani would ride into battle without a leader. The Damani? I wasn't talking about that. She followed his eyes. A new force was approaching, moving with apparent haste, under the banner of the Red Bull. Murandi, Egwene said. Curious. Roadran has finally decided to join the rest of the world. The newly arrived Murandians made more show than they probably deserved. Their apparel, at least, was pretty. Yellow and red tunics over mail, brass helmets with wide brims. The wide red belts bore the symbol of the charging bull. They kept their distance from the Andorrans, wrapping around behind the Aiel forces and coming in from the northwest. Egwene looked toward Rand's camp. Still no sign of the dragon himself. Come, she said, nudging Sifter into motion toward the Murandian force. Gawain fell in beside her, and Shubane brought a force of 20 soldiers as a guard. Roadran was a corpulent man swathed in red and gold. She could practically hear the man's horse groaning with each step. His thinning hair was more white than black, and he watched her with an unexpectedly keen expression. The king of Murandi was little more than ruler of one city, Lugard, but her reports indicated that this man wasn't doing a bad job of expanding his rule. Given a few years, he might actually have a full kingdom to call his own. Roadran held up a meaty hand, stopping his procession. She reined in her horse and waited for him to approach her, as would be customary. He didn't. Gawain muttered a curse. Egwene let a smile tug at the edges of her lips. Warders could be useful, if only to express what she should not. Finally, she nudged her horse forward. So, Roadran looked her over. You're the new Amerlin, an Andorran. The Amerlin has no nationality, Egwene said coolly. I am curious to find you here, Roadran. When did the dragon extend an invitation to you? He didn't. Roadran waited for a cupbearer to bring him some wine. I thought it was high time Murandi stopped being left out of events. And through whose gateways did you arrive? Surely you didn't cross Andor to reach here? Roadran hesitated. You came from the south, Egwene said, studying him. Andor. Elaine sent for you? She did not send for me, Roadran snapped. The Bloody Queen promised me if I supported her cause, she'd release a proclamation of intention, promising not to invade Murand. He hesitated. Besides, I've been curious to see this false dragon. Everybody in the world seems to have taken leave of their senses regarding him. You do know what this meeting is about,
Do one
don't
more
you?
dab.
Egwene said.
Then we'll start
He
round
waved a
one.
hand. talking this man out of his conquering ways or something like that. Good enough. Egwene leaned forward. I hear your rule is consolidating nicely, and that Lugard may actually have some real authority in Mirandy for once. Yes, Roadron said, sitting up a bit straighter. That is true. Egwene leaned forward further. You're welcome, she said softly, then smiled. She turned stricter and led her retinue away. Egwene, Gawain said softly, trotting his horse beside hers. Did you really just do that? Does he look troubled? Gawain glanced over his shoulder. Very. Excellent. Gawain continued riding for a moment, then broke into a deep grin. That was positively evil. He's as boorishly rude as reports have made him out to be, Egwene said. He can suffer a few nights spent wondering how the White Tower has been pulling strings in his realm. If I'm feeling particularly vengeful, I'll set up some good secrets for him to unearth. Now, where is that sheep herder? He has the audacity to demand that we... She trailed off as she saw him coming. Rand strode across the browning grass of the field wearing red and gold. A tremendous bundle hovered in the air beside him, held up by leaves she could not see. The grass greened at his feet. It wasn't a large change. Where he trod, the turf recovered, spreading from him like a soft wave of light through opening shutters. Men stepped back. Horses stamped their hooves. Within minutes, the entire ring of troops stood on grass that lived again. How long had it been since she'd seen a simple field of green? Egwene breathed out. Some of the gloom to the day had been lightened. I'd give good coin to know how he does that, she murmured under her breath. A weave? Gawain asked. I've seen Aes Sedai make flowers bloom in winter. I know of no weave that would be so extensive, Egwene said. It feels so natural. Go see if you can find out how he's doing it. Maybe one of the Aes Sedai with Ashaman warders will let the truth out. Gawain nodded, slipping away. Rand continued his walk, trailed by that large floating bundle, Ashaman in black and an honor guard of Aiel. The Aiel spurned regular ranks, sweeping the land like a swarm, fanning out. Even soldiers who followed Rand shied back from the Aiel. For many of the older soldiers, a wave of browns and tans like that meant death. Rand walked calmly, purposefully. The cloth bundle he carried with air began to unravel in front of him. Large swaths of canvas rippled in the wind before Rand, braiding with one another, leaving long trails behind themselves. Wooden poles and metal stakes fell from inside them, and Rand caught those in unseen threads of air, spinning them. He never broke stride. He didn't look at the maelstrom of cloth, wood, and iron as canvas rippled in front of him like fish from the depths. Small clods of soil erupted from the ground. Some soldiers jumped. He's grown into quite the showman, Egwene thought, as the poles spun and came down in the holes. Sweeping bands of cloth wrapped around them, tying themselves. In seconds, a massive pavilion settled into place, the dragon banner flapping from one end, the banner with the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai on the other. Rand didn't break stride as he reached the pavilion, cloth sides parting for him. You may each bring 5, he announced as he stepped inside. Sylviana, Egwene said. Saerin, Romanda, Lilane. Gawain will be our 5th when he returns. Sitters behind suffered the decision in silence. They couldn't complain about her taking her warder for protection or her keeper for support. The other 3 she'd chosen were widely considered among the most influential in the tower, and together the 4 she brought included 2 Aes Sedai each from Saladar and the White Tower Loyalists. The other rulers allowed Egwene to enter before them. All understood that this confrontation was, at its core, between Rand and Egwene. Or rather, the dragon and the Amerlin's seat. There were no chairs inside the pavilion, though Rand hung Sidene globes of light at the corners, and one of the Ashaman deposited a small table at the center. She did a quick count. 13 glowing globes. Rand stood facing her, arms behind his back, hand clasping his other forearm as had become his habit. Min stood at his side, one hand on his arm. "Mother," he said, nodding his head. So he would pretend respect, would he? Egwene nodded back. "Lord Dragon?" The other rulers and their small retinues filed in, many doing so with timidity until Elaine swept in, the sorrow on her face lightening as Rand smiled warmly at her. The wool-headed woman was still impressed with Rand, pleased with how he'd managed to bully everyone into coming here. Elaine considered it a matter of pride when he did well. "And you don't feel a small measure of pride?" Egwene asked herself. "Rand al'Thor, once simple village boy and your near betrothed, now the most powerful man in the world, you don't feel proud of what he's done?" Perhaps a little. The Borderlanders entered, led by King Isar of Shinar, and there was nothing timid about them. The Damani were led by an older man that Egwene did not know. "Al-Salam," Sylviana whispered, sounding surprised. "He has returned." Egwene frowned. Why hadn't any of her informants told her he had shown up? Light. Did Rand know that the White Tower had tried to take him into custody? Egwene herself had discovered that fact only a few days before, buried in a pile of Elida's papers. Cadsuane entered, and Rand nodded to her, as if giving permission. She didn't bring 5, but neither did he seem to require her to be counted among Egwene's 5. That struck her as a bothersome precedent. Perrin stepped in with his wife, and they stayed to the side. Perrin folded his tree-trunk arms, wearing his new hammer at his belt. He was far easier to read than Rand was. He was worried, but he trusted Rand. Nynaeve did too, burn her. She took her position near Perrin and Fail. The Aiel clan chiefs and wise ones entered in a large mass. Rand's "bring only 5" probably meant that each clan chief could bring 5. Some wise ones, including Soralia and Amis, made their way to Egwene's side of the tent. Light bless them, Egwene thought, releasing a held breath. Rand's eyes flickered toward the women, and Egwene caught a tightening of his lips. He was surprised that all the Aiel didn't back him, each and every one. King Roadron of Murundi was one of the last to enter the tent, and Egwene noticed something curious as he did. Several of Rand's Ashaman, Narishma, Flynn, Nafe, moved in behind Roadron. Others, near Rand, looked as alert as cats who had seen a wolf wander by. Rand stepped over to the shorter, wider man and looked down into his eyes. Roadron stuttered for a moment, then started wiping his brow with a handkerchief. Rand continued to stare at him. "What is it?" Roadron demanded. "You're the dragon reborn, so they say. I do not know that I'd have let you—" "Stop," Rand said, raising a finger. Roadron quieted immediately. "Light burn me," Rand said. "You're not him, are you?" "Who?" Roadron asked. Rand turned away from him, waving his hand to make Narishma and the others stand down. They did so reluctantly. "I thought for certain," Rand said, shaking his head. "Where are you?" "Who?" Roadron asked loudly, almost squeaking. Rand ignored him. The flaps to the pavilion had finally stilled everyone inside. "So," Rand said, "we are all here. Thank you for coming." "It's not like we did have much of a bloody choice," Gregorin grumbled. He'd brought a handful of Ilianer nobility with him as his 5, all members of the Council of 9. "We did be
Lighting
caught
number 1.
between you and the White Tower itself. Light burn us." "You know by now," Rand continued, "that Kandor has fallen and Camelin has been taken by the Shadow. The last remnants of Malkir are under assault at Tarwin's Gap. The end is upon us." "Then why are we standing here, Rand al'Thor?" demanded King Pytar of Arafel. The aging man had only a thin ribbon of gray hair remaining on his head, but he was still broad-shouldered and intimidating. "Let us put an end to this posturing and be to it, man. There is fighting to be done." "I promise you fighting, Pytar," Rand said softly. "All that you can stomach, and then some. 3,000 years ago, I met the Dark One's forces in battle. We had the wonders of the Age of Legends. Aes Sedai who could do things that would make your mind reel. ter'angreal that could enable people to fly and make them immune to blows. We still barely won. Have you considered that? We face the Shadow in much the same state as it was then, with Forsaken who have not aged. But we are not the same people. Not by far." The tent fell silent. Flaps blew in the breeze. "What are you saying, Rand al'Thor?" Egwene said, folding her arms. "That we are doomed?" "I'm saying we need to plan," Rand said, "and present a unified attack. That we did poorly last time, and it nearly cost us the war. We each thought we knew the best way to go." He met Egwene's eyes. "In those days, every man and woman considered themselves to be the leader on the field. An army of generals. That is why we nearly lost. That is what left us with the taint, the breaking, the madness. I was as guilty of it as anyone, perhaps the most guilty. I will not have that happen again. I will not save this world only to have it broken a second time. I will not die for the nations of humanity only to have them turn upon one another the moment the last Trolloc falls. You're planning it. Light burn me, I know that you are." It would have been easy to miss the glances that Gregorin and Darlin shot at one another, or the covetous way Roedran watched Elaine. Which nations would be broken by this conflict, and which would step in, out of altruism, to help its neighbors? How quickly would altruism become greed, the chance to hold another throne? Many of the rulers here were decent people. It took more than a decent person to hold that much power and not look afield. Even Elaine had gobbled up another country when the opportunity presented itself. She would do so again. It was the nature of rulers, the nature of nations. In Elaine's case, it even seemed appropriate, as Kyrian would be better off beneath her rule than it had been. How many would assume the same? That they, of course, could rule better or restore order in another land. "Nobody wants war," Egwene said, drawing the crowd's attention. "However, I think what you are trying to do here is beyond your calling, Rand al'Thor. You cannot change human nature, and you cannot bend the world to your whims. Let people live their lives and choose their own paths." "I will not, Egwene," Rand said. There was a fire in his eyes, like the one she'd seen when he first sought to bring the Aiel to his cause. Yes, that emotion seemed very like Rand. Frustration that people didn't see the world as clearly as he thought he did. "I don't see what else you can do," Egwene said. "Would you appoint an emperor? Someone to rule over us all? Would you become a true tyrant, Rand al'Thor? He didn't snap back a retort. He held out his hand to the side, and one of his Ashaman slipped a rolled paper
I'll
into it.
be right back.
Rand took it and placed it on the table. He used the power to unroll it and to keep it flat. The oversized document was filled with tight, cramped letters. "I call it the Dragon's Peace," Rand said softly, "and it is one of the 3 things which I will require of you. Your payment to me in exchange for my life." "Let me see that." Elaine reached for it, and Rand obviously let it go because she was able to snatch it off the table before any of the other surprised rulers. "It locks the borders of your nations to their current positions," Rand said, arms behind his back again. "It forbids country from attacking country, and it requires the opening of a great school in each capital, fully funded, and with doors open to those who wish to learn." "It does more than that," Elaine said, one finger to the document as she read. "Attack another land or enter into a minor armed border dispute, and the other nations of the world have an obligation to defend the country attacked. Light. Tariff restrictions to prevent the strangling of economies, barriers on marriage between rulers of nations, unless the 2 lines of rule are clearly divided, provisions for stripping the land from a lord who starts a conflict. Rand, you really expect us to sign this?" "Yes." The outrage from the rulers was immediate, though Egwene stood calmly and shot a few glances at the other Aes Sedai. They seemed troubled, as well they should be, and this was only part of Rand's price. The rulers muttered, each wanting a chance at the document, but not wanting to shoulder in and look over Elaine's shoulder. Fortunately, Rand had fought ahead, and smaller versions of the document were distributed. "But there are very good reasons for conflict sometimes," Darlin said, looking over his document, "such as creating a buffer between you and an aggressive neighbor. Or what if some people from our country do be living across the border?" Grigorin added. "Do we not have the mandate to step in and protect them if they do be oppressed? Or what if someone like the Shanshan do claim land that is ours? Forbidding war do seem ridiculous." "I agree," Darlin said. "Lord Dragon, we should have the mandate to defend land that is rightfully ours." Egwene said, cutting through the arguments, "am more interested to hear his other 2 requirements." "You know one of them," Rand said. "The seals," Egwene said. "Signing this document would mean nothing to the White Tower," Rand said, apparently ignoring the comment. "I can't very well forbid all of you to influence the others. That would be foolishness." "It's already foolishness," Elaine said. Elaine was not feeling so proud of him any longer, Egwene thought. "And as long as there are political games to be played," Rand continued to Egwene, "the Aes Sedai will master them. In fact, this document benefits you. The White Tower has always believed war to be, as they say, short-sighted. Instead, I demand something else of you. The seals. I am their watcher, in name only. They were only just discovered, and I possess them. It is out of respect for your traditional title that I approached you about them first." "Approached me? You didn't make a request," she said. "You didn't make a demand. You came, told me what you were going to do, and walked away." "I have the seals," he repeated, "and I will break them. I won't allow anything, not even you, to come between me and protecting this world." All around them, arguments over the document continued, rulers muttering with their confidants and neighbors. Egwene stepped forward, facing Rand across the small table. The 2 of them ignored for the moment. "You won't break them if I stop you, Rand." Why would you want to stop me, Egwene? Give me a single reason why it would be a bad idea. A single reason other than that it will let the Dark One loose on the world? He was not loose during the War of Power, Rand said. He could touch the world, but the bore being opened will not loose him. Not immediately. And what was the cost of letting him touch the world? What are they now? Horrors, terrors, destruction. You know what is happening to the land. The dead walking, the strange twisting of the pattern. This is what happens with the seals only weakened. What happens if we actually break them? The light only knows. It is a risk that must be taken. I don't agree. Rand, you don't know what releasing his seals will do. You don't know if it might let him escape. You don't know how close he was to getting out when the bore was last secured. Shattering those seals could destroy the world itself. What if our only hope lies in the fact that he's hindered this time, not completely free? It won't work, Igwe. You don't know that. How can you? He hesitated. Many things in life are uncertain. So you don't know, she said. Well, I have been looking, reading, listening. Have you read the works of those who have studied this, thought about it? Aes Sedai's speculation. The only information we have, Rand. Open the Dark One's prison and all could be lost. We have to be more careful. This is what the Amerlin seat is for. This is part of why the White Tower was founded in the first place. He actually hesitated. Light, he was thinking. Could she be getting through to him? I don't like it, Egwene, Rand said softly. If I go up against him and the seals are not broken, my only choice will be to create another imperfect solution. A patch, even worse than the one last time. Because with the old weakened seals there, I'll just be spreading new plaster over deep cracks. Who knows how long the seals would last this time? In a few centuries, we could have this same fight all over again. Is that so bad? Egwene said. At least it's sure. You sealed the bore last time. You know how to do it. We could end up with the taint again. We're ready for it this time. No, it wouldn't be ideal. But Rand, do we really want to risk this? Risk the fate of every living being? Why not take the simple path, the known path? Mend the seals again. Shore up the prison. No, Egwene. Rand backed away. Light. Is this what it's about? You want Saidin to be tainted again. You Aes Sedai. You're threatened by the idea of men who can channel, undermining your authority. Rand al'Thor, don't you dare be that level of a fool. He met her eyes. The rulers seemed to be paying little attention to this conversation, despite the fact that the world depended on it. They pored over Rand's document, muttering in outrage. Perhaps that was what he had intended, to distract them with the document and pounce for the real fight. Slowly the rage melted from his face, and he raised his hand to the side of his head. Light, Egwene. You can still do it, like the sister I never had. Tie my mind in knots and have me raving at you and loving you at the same time. At least I'm consistent, she said. They were now speaking very softly, leaning across the table toward one another. To the side, Perrin and Nynaeve were probably close enough to hear, and Min had joined them. Gawain had returned, but he kept his distance. Cadswain rounded the room, looking in the other direction. Pointedly, she was listening in. I am not making this argument in some fool hope to restore the taint, Egwene said. You know I'm better than that. This is about protecting humankind. I can't believe you are willing to risk everything on a slender chance. A slender chance? Rand said. We're talking about entering darkness instead of founding another age of legends. We could have peace, an end to suffering. Or we could have another breaking. Light, Egwene. I don't know for certain if I could mend the seals or make new ones in the same way. The Dark One has to be ready for that plan. And you have another one? I've been telling it to you. I break the seals to get rid of the old imperfect plug and try again in a new way. The world itself is the cost of failure, Rand. She thought a moment. There's more here. What aren't you telling me?
Tangle one down.
Rand looked hesitant, and for a moment he seemed the child she'd once caught sneaking bites of Mistress Cawthon's pies with Matt. I'm going to kill him, Egwene. Who? Moradine? The Dark One. She drew back in shock. I'm sorry. What did you... I'm going to kill him, Rand said passionately, leaning in. I'm going to end the Dark One. We will never have true peace so long as he is there lurking. I'll rip open the prison, I'll enter it, and I'll face him. I'll build a new prison if I have to, but first I'm going to try to end all of this. Protect the pattern for you, for good. You're insane. Yes, that is part of the price I have paid. Fortunately, only a man with shaken wits would be daring enough to try. I'll fight you, Rand, she whispered. I won't let you pull all of us into this. Listen to reason. The White Tower should be guiding you here. I've known the White Tower's guidance, Egwene, he replied. In a box. Beaten every day. The two locked eyes across the table. Nearby, other arguments continued. I don't mind signing this, Tenobia said. That looks fine to me. Bah, Gregorin snarled. You borderlanders never care anything for southern politics. You'll sign it? Well, good for you. I, however, won't chain my country to the wall. Curious, Isar said. The calm man shook his head, pure white topknot bobbing. As I understand, it's not your country, Gregorin, unless you're assuming that the Lord Dragon will die, and that Matin Stepaneus will not demand his throne back. He may be willing for the Lord Dragon to wear the laurel crown, but not you, I'm sure. Isn't all of this meaningless? Alejandra asked. The Shan are our worry now, aren't they? Peace can never exist so long as they are there. Yes, Gregorin said. The Shan and those cursed white cloaks. We will sign it, Galad said. Somehow, the Lord Captain Commander of the Children of the Light had ended up holding the official copy of the document. Egwene didn't look at it. It was hard not to stare. She loved Gawain and not Galad, but, well, it was hard not to stare. Mayenne will sign it as well, Berylane said. I find the Lord Dragon's will to be perfectly just. Of course you'd sign it, Darlin sniffed. My Lord Dragon, this document seems designed to protect the interests of some nations more than others. I want to hear what his third requirement is, Roedran said. I don't care anything for talk of the seals, that is Aes Sedai business. He claimed there were 3 requirements, and we have heard only 2. Rand raised an eyebrow. The third and final price.
Nice.
The last thing you will pay me in exchange for my life on the slopes of Shale Ghul is this.
Greatest.
I command your armies for the last battle. Utterly and completely. You do as I say, go where I say, fight where I say. This caused a larger eruption of arguments. It was obviously the least outrageous of the 3 demands, though it was impossible for reasons Egwene had already determined. The rulers treated it as an attack on their sovereignty. Gregorin glowered at Rand through the din, only maintaining the most threadbare respect. Amusing, since he had the least authority of them all. Darlin shook his head, and Elaine's face was livid. Those on Rand's side argued back, primarily the Borderlanders. They're desperate, Egwene thought. They're being overrun. They probably thought that if command were given to the dragon, he would immediately march to the defense of the Borderlands. Darlin and Gregorin would never agree to that. Not with the Shan-Chan breathing down their necks. Light. What a mess. Egwene listened to the arguments, hoping they would set Rand on edge. Once they might have. Now he stood and watched, arms folded behind his back. His face became serene, though she was increasingly certain that was a mask. She'd seen flashes of his temper inside. Rand certainly was more in control of himself now, but he was by no means emotionless. Egwene actually found herself smiling. For all of his complaints about Aes Sedai, for all of his insistence that he wouldn't be controlled by them, he was acting more and more like one of them himself. She prepared to speak and take control, but something in the tent changed. A feeling
Hey, High
to
Life,
the
how you
air.
doing?
Her
Not
eyes
doing too
seemed
bad.
drawn to Rand. Sounds came from outside, sounds she couldn't place. A faint cracking sound? What was he doing? The arguments
dab.
trailed off. One by one, the rulers turned toward him. The sunlight outside dimmed, and she was glad for those spheres of light he had made. I need you, Rand said softly to them. The land itself needs you. You argue. I knew that you would, but we no longer have time for arguments. Know this. You cannot talk me out of my designs. You cannot make me obey you. No force of arms nor weave of the One Power can make me face the Dark One for you. I must do it of my own choice. You would really toss the world for this, Lord Dragon? Barrelane asked. Egwene smiled. The light skirt suddenly didn't seem so certain of the side she had chosen. I won't have to, Rand said. You'll sign it. To fail to do so means death. So it's an extortion, Darlin snapped. No, Rand said, smiling toward the sea folk, who had said little as they stood near Perrin. They had simply read the document and nodded among themselves, as if impressed. No, Darlin, it's not extortion. It's an arrangement. I have something you want, something you need. Me, my blood. I will die. We've all known this from the start. The prophecies demand it. As you wish this of me, I will sell it to you in exchange for a legacy of
High
peace
Life, appreciate
to
it.
balance out the
Well, my
legacy
day's
of
not going
destruction
too
I
bad.
gave the world last time.
Oh, it's in the
He scanned the
80s and
meeting,
90s.
looking at each ruler in turn. Egwene felt his determination almost like a physical thing. Perhaps it was his Tavira nature, or perhaps it was just the weight of the moment. A pressure rose inside the pavilion, making it difficult to breathe. He's going to do it, she thought. They'll complain, but they'll bend. No, Egwene said loudly, her voice breaking the air. No, Rand al'Thor. We will not be bullied into signing your document, into giving you sole control of this battle. And you're an utter fool if you think I believe you'd let the
Yeah,
world,
be right back.
your father, your friends, all those you love, all of humanity, be slaughtered by Trollocs if we defy you. He met her eyes, and suddenly she wasn't certain. Like, he wouldn't really refuse, would he? Would he really sacrifice the world? You dare call the Lord Dragon foolish? Demanded Narishma. The Amerlin is not to be spoken to that way, Sylviana said, stepping up beside Egwene. The arguments began again, this time louder. Rand kept Egwene's eyes, and she saw the flush of anger rise in his face. The shouting rose, tension mounting, unrest, anger, old hatreds flaring anew, fueled by terror. Rand rested his hand on the sword he wore these days, the one with the dragons on the scabbard, his other arm folded behind his back. I will have my price, Egwene, he growled. Require if you wish, Rand. You are not the creator.
Shit.
If you go to the last battle with this foolishness, we're all dead anyway. If I fight you, then there is a chance I can change your mind. Ever the White Tower has been a spear at my throat, Rand snapped. Ever,
Let's load a
Egwene.
fresh dab.
And now you really
Do a
have
dab
become
and
one of them.
Then we'll start round 2.
She met his stare. Inside, however, she was beginning to lose certainty. What if these negotiations did break down? Would she really drive her soldiers to fight Rands? She felt as if she had tripped over a rock at the top of a cliff and was tipping toward the fall. There had to be a way to stop this, to salvage it. Rand started to turn away. If he left the pavilion, that would be the end of it. Rand, she said. He froze. I will not budge, Egwene. Don't do this, she said. Don't throw it all away. It cannot be helped. Yes, it can. All you have to do is stop being such a light-burned, wool-headed, stubborn fool for once. Egwene drew herself back. How could she have spoken to him as if they were back in Emmons Field at their beginning? Rand stared at her for a moment. Well, you could certainly stop being a spoiled, self-certain, unmitigated brat for once, Egwene. He threw up his arms. Blood and ashes. This was a waste of time. He was very nearly right. Egwene didn't notice someone new entering the tent. Rand did, however, and he spun as the flaps parted and let in light. He frowned at the interloper. His frown died as soon as he saw the person who entered. Moiraine.
Chapter 6. A Knack. The pavilion grew quiet again. Perrin hated a racket, and the people's scents weren't any better. Frustration, anger, fear, terror. Much of it was directed at the woman standing just inside the entrance to the pavilion. Matt, you blessed fool, Perrin thought, breaking into a grin. You did it. You actually did it. For the first time in a while, thinking of Matt made the colors swirl in his vision. He saw Matt on a horse, riding along a dusty road, tinkering with something he held. Perrin dismissed the image. Where had Matt gotten to now? Why hadn't he come back with Moiraine? It didn't matter. Moiraine was back. Light. Moiraine. Perrin started toward her to give her an embrace, but Fail caught him by the sleeve. He followed her eyes. Rand. His face had grown pale. He stumbled away from the table as if all else had been forgotten and pushed his way to Moiraine. He hesitantly reached out and touched her face. On my mother's grave, Rand whispered, then fell to his knees before her. How? Moiraine smiled, resting a hand on his shoulder. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, Rand. Have you forgotten that? Not as you will, Dragon Reborn. Not as any of us will. Perhaps one day it will weave itself out of existence. I do not believe that day is today.
Done or
Nor a
ready
day soon.
and about to do
Who is
another
this
dab.
woman? Roadron said. And what is she blathering about? He cut off as something unseen flicked him on the side of the head, causing him to jump. Perrin glanced at Rand, then noticed the smile on Egwene's lips. He caught the scent of her satisfaction despite all of the people in the pavilion. Nynaeve and Min, standing nearby, smelled utterly shocked. The light-willing Nynaeve would stay that way for a little while. Shouting at Moiraine wouldn't help right now. You haven't answered my question, Rand said. But I have, Moiraine replied fondly. It just was not the answer you wanted. Rand knelt, then threw his head back and laughed. Light Moraine, you haven't changed, have you? We all change day by day, she replied, then smiled. Me more than some lately. Stand up. It is I who should be kneeling before you, Lord Dragon. We all should. Rand rose and stepped back to allow Moraine farther into the pavilion. Perrin caught another scent and smiled as Tom Maryland slipped into the tent behind her. The old Leman winked at Perrin. Moraine, Egwene said, stepping forward. The White Tower welcomes you back with open arms. Your service has not been forgotten. Moraine said. Yes, I should think that having discovered a future Amerlin would reflect well upon me. That is a relief, as I believe I was on a path to stilling, if not execution, before. Things have changed. Obviously, Moraine nodded. Mother? She passed Perrin and gave him a squeeze on the arm, eyes twinkling. One by one, the Borderlander rulers took swords in hands and bowed or curtsied toward her. Each one seemed to know her personally. Many of the others in the tent still looked baffled, though Darlin obviously knew who she was. He was more thoughtful than confused. Moraine hesitated beside Nynaeve. Perrin couldn't catch Nynaeve's scent right then. That seemed ominous to him. All right, here it comes. Nynaeve enfolded Moraine in a powerful embrace. Moraine stood for a moment, smelling distinctly shocked, hands out to the sides. Finally, she returned the embrace in a somewhat maternal way, patting Nynaeve on the back. Nynaeve released her, pulling back, then wiped a tear from her eye. Don't you dare tell Lan about this, she growled. I would not dream of it, Moraine said, moving on to stand in the center of the pavilion. Insufferable woman, Nynaeve grumbled as she wiped a tear from the other eye. Moraine, Egwene said, you've come at just the right time. I have a knack for that. Well, Egwene continued as Rand stepped back up to the table. Rand, the dragon reborn, has decided to hold this land for ransom to his demands, refusing to do his duty unless we agree to his whims. Moraine pursed her lips, taking up the contract for the dragon's peace as Galad set it on the table for her. She scanned it. Who is this woman? Roedran said. And why do we... Would you stop that? He raised a hand as if he'd been smacked by a thread of air, then glared at Egwene. However, this time, one of the nearby Ashaman was the one who smelled satisfied. Nice.
Oh, I don't even have that much. I have
whispered. Thank you, Lord Perrin. Grady would know her only by legend, of course.
I think I got
but tales
maybe
of
a gram
Moraine
left.
spread among those who followed Rand. Well, Egwene said, and it shall come to pass that what men made shall be shattered, Moraine whispered. The shadow shall lie across the pattern of the age, and the Dark One shall once more lay his hand upon the world of man. Women shall weep and men quail as the nations of the earth are rent like rotting cloth. Neither shall anything stand nor abide. The people shuffled their feet. Perrin looked questioningly at Rand. Yet one shall be born to face the shadow, Moraine said more loudly. Born once more as he was born before and shall be born again. Time without end. The dragon shall be reborn, and there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth at his rebirth. In sackcloth and ashes shall he clothe the people, and he shall break the world again by his coming, tearing apart all ties that bind. Like the unfettered dawn shall he blind us and burn us, yet shall the dragon reborn confront the shadow at the last battle, and his blood shall give us the light. Let tears flow, O ye people of the world. Weep for your salvation. Aes Sedai, Darlin said. Pardon, but this is very ominous. At least it shall be a salvation, Moraine said. Tell me, your majesty, that prophecy commands you to shed tears. Are you to weep because your salvation comes with such pain and worry? Or instead are you to weep for your salvation, for the man who will suffer for you, the only one we know for certain will not walk away from this fight? She turned to Rand. These demands are unfair, Gregorin said. He requires us to keep our borders as they are. He shall slay his people with the sword of peace, Moraine said.
I'll be right back.
And destroy them with the leaf.
Round two.
It's the Koreathon cycle. I've heard these words before. The seals, Moraine, Egwene said. He's planning to break them. He defies the authority of the Amelin seat. Moraine did not look surprised. Perrin suspected she'd been listening outside before entering. It was very like her. Oh, Egwene, Moraine said. Have you forgotten? The unstained tower breaks and bends knee to the forgotten side. Egwene blushed. There can be no health in us, nor any good thing grow, Moraine quoted. For the land is one with the dragon reborn, and he one with the land. Soul of fire, heart of stone. She looked to Gregorin. In pride he conquers, forcing the proud to yield. To the borderlanders, he calls upon the mountains to kneel. To the sea folk, and the seas to give way. To Perrin, then Berylane, and the very skies to bow. To Darlin, pray that the heart of stone remembers tears. Then finally to Elaine, and the soul of fire, love. You cannot fight this. None of you can. I'm sorry. You think he has come to this on his own? She held up the document. The pattern is balance. It is not good nor evil, not wisdom nor foolishness. To the pattern these things matter not. Yet it will find balance. The last age ended with a breaking, and so the next one will begin with peace, even if it must be shoved down your throats like medicine given to a screaming babe. If I may speak, an Aes Sedai wearing a brown shawl stepped forward. You may, Rand said. This is a wise document, Lord Dragon, the Brown said. She was a stout woman, more direct of tone than Perrin expected from a Brown. But I see an enormous flaw to it, one that was raised earlier. So long as the Shan-Chan are exempt from it, it will be meaningless. There will be no peace so long as they conquer. That's an issue, Elaine said, arms folded. But not the only one. Rand, I see what you're trying to do, and I love you for it. That does not remove the fact that this document is fundamentally untenable. For a peace treaty to work, both sides must continue to wish for peace because of the benefits presented. This grants no way to settle disputes. They will arise. They always do. Any document like this must give a way to settle such things. You must set up a way to punish an infraction, save for the other countries to enter all-out war. Without that change, little grievances will mount and build pressure over years until they explode. As this is, it all but requires the nations to fall upon the first that breaks the peace. It does not stop them from setting up a puppet regime in the Fallen Kingdom, or even in another kingdom. Over time, I fear this treaty will be viewed as null. What good is it if it protects only on paper? The end result of this will be war. Massive, overpowering war. You will have peace for a time, particularly while those who revere you live. But for every year of peace you gain, you will earn one of greater destruction once the thing falls apart. Rand rested his fingers on the document. I will make peace with the Shan-Chan. We will add a provision. If their ruler does not sign, Then the document is voided. Will you all agree to it then? That fixes the lesser problem, Elaine said softly, but not the larger one, Rand. There is yet a greater issue here, a new voice said. Perrin turned, surprised. Avienda? She and the other Aiel had not participated in the arguments. They'd only watched. Perrin had almost forgotten they were there. You too? Rand said. Come to walk on the shards of my dream, Avienda? Don't be a child, Rand al'Thor, the woman said, striding up to place her finger on the document. You have toe. I left you out of it, Rand protested. I trust you, and all of the Aiel. The Aiel aren't in it? Isar said. Light, how did we miss that? It is an insult, Avienda said. Perrin frowned. She smelled very serious. From any other Aiel, you'd expect that sharp scent to be followed by a pulled-up veil and a raised spear. Avienda, Rand said, smiling. The others are about to hang me for putting them in it, and you are angry for being left out? I demand my boon of you, she said. This is it. Place the Aiel in your document, your dragon's peace. We will leave you otherwise. You don't speak for all of them, Avienda, Rand said. You can't. All of the tense wise ones stepped up behind Avienda, as if in rhythm together. Rand blinked. Avienda carries our honor, Soralia said. Don't be foolish, Rand al'Thor, Melaine added. This is a thing of the women, Serinda added. We will not be satisfied until we are treated equally with the Wetlanders. Is this thing too difficult for us? Amis asked. Do you insult us by implying we are weaker than the others? You're all insane, Rand said. Do you realize that this would forbid you from fighting one another? Not from fighting, Avienda said. From fighting without cause. War is your purpose, Rand said. If you believe that, Rand al'Thor, she said, voice cold. I have trained you poorly indeed. She speaks wisdom, Ruark said, stepping up to the front of the crowd. Our purpose was to prepare for your need of us at this last battle. Our purpose was to be strong enough to be preserved. We will need another purpose. I have buried blood feuds for you, Rand al'Thor. I will not take them up again. I have friends now that I would rather not kill. Madness, Rand said, shaking his head. All right, I'll put you in. Avienda seemed satisfied, but something bothered Perrin. He didn't understand the Aiel. Light, he didn't understand Gaul, who had been with him for so long. Still, he'd noticed that the Aiel liked to be doing something. Even when they lounged, they were alert. When other men gamed or diced, the Aiel were often quietly doing something of use. Rand, Perrin said, stepping up, taking him by the arm. A moment, please. Rand hesitated, then nodded to him and waved his hand. We're sealed off. They can't hear us now. What is this about? Well, I just noticed something. The Aiel are like tools. All right. And tools that aren't used grow rusty, Perrin said. Which is why they raid one another, Rand said, rubbing his temple. To keep up their skills. That is why I exempted them. Like Perrin, I think this is going to be a disaster. If we include them in this document... I don't think you have a choice now, Perrin said. The others will never sign it if the Aiel are left out. I don't know if they'll sign it anyway, Rand said. He looked longingly at the sheet on the table. It was such a beautiful dream, Perrin. A dream of good for humanity. I thought I had them. Right up until Egwene called my bluff, I thought I had them. It was a good thing others couldn't smell Rand's emotions, or everyone there would have known that he'd never refused to go against the Dark One. Rand showed not a hint of it on his face, but inside, Perrin knew he had been as nervous as a boy at his first shearing. Rand, don't you see? Perrin said. The solution. Rand frowned at him. The Aiel, Perrin said. The tool that needs to be used, a treaty that needs to be enforced. Rand hesitated, then grinned widely. You're a genius, Perrin. So long as it's about blacksmithing, I suppose I know a thing or two. But this isn't about blacksmithing, Perrin. Of course it is, Perrin said. How could Rand not see that? Rand turned, no doubt ending his weave. He strode up to the document and held it up toward one of his clerks in the back of the pavilion. I want 2 provisions added. First, this document is void if not signed by either the Shanchan Daughter of the Nine Moons or the Empress. Second, the Aiel, all but the Shido, are to be written into the document as enforcers of the peace and mediators of disputes between nations. Any nation may call upon them if they feel abused, and the Aiel, not enemy armies, will provide redress. They can hunt criminals across national borders. They are to be subject to the laws of the nations in which they reside at the time, but they are not subjects of that nation. He turned to Elaine. There is your enforcement, Elaine. The way to keep your small pressures from building. The Aiel? She asked skeptically. Will you agree to this, Ruark? Rand asked. Bael? Jaron? The rest of you? You claim to be left without purpose, and Perrin sees you as a tool that needs to be worked. Will you take this charge? To prevent war? To punish those who do wrong? To work with the rulers of nations to see justice served? Justice as we see it, Randall Thor, Ruark said, or as they see it. It will have to be according to the conscience of the Aiel, Rand said. If they call for you, they will have to know that they'll receive your justice. This will not work if the Aiel simply become pawns. Your autonomy will be what makes this effective. Gregorn and Darlin began to complain, but Rand silenced them with a look. Perrin nodded to himself, arms folded. Their complaints were weaker now than they had been before. He smelled thoughtfulness from many of them. They see this as an opportunity, he realized. They view the Aiel as savages, and think they'll be easy to manipulate once Rand is gone. Perrin grinned, imagining their defeat should they attempt that course. This is very sudden, Ruark said. Welcome to the dinner party, Elaine added, still staring daggers at Rand. Try the soup. Oddly, she smelled proud. Strange woman. I warn you, Ruark, Rand said. You will need to change your ways. The Aiel will have to act together on these matters. The chiefs and wise ones will need to hold council to make decisions together. One clan cannot fight a battle while other clans disagree and fight for the other side. We will speak of it, Ruark said, nodding to the other Aiel chiefs. This will mean an end to the Aiel. A beginning as well, Rand said. The Aiel clan chiefs and the wise ones gathered separately to one side and spoke in soft voices. Abienda lingered, with Rand staring away, troubled. Perrin heard him whisper something, so soft Perrin's ears barely made it out. Your dream now, when you wake from this life, will be no more.
I'll be right back.
Rand's clerks, smelling frantic, came forward to begin working on the document's additions. The woman Cadswain watched all events with a stern expression. She smelled extremely proud. Add a provision, Rand said. The Aiel can call upon other nations to aid them in their enforcement if they decide that their own numbers will not be enough. Give formal methods by which nations can petition the Aiel for redress or for permission to attack a foe. The clerks nodded, working harder. You act as if this were settled, Egwene said, eyes on Rand. Oh, it is far from that, Moraine said, Rand, I have some words for you. Are they words I will like? He asked. I suspect not. Tell me, why do you need to command the armies yourself? You will be traveling to Sheol, where you will no doubt be unable to contact anyone. Somebody needs to be in command, Moraine. On this point, I believe all would agree. Rand folded his arms behind his back, smelling troubled. I have taken responsibility for this people, Moraine. I want to see that they're cared for, that the brutalities of this battle are minimized. I fear that is a poor reason to lead a battle, Moraine said softly. You do not fight to preserve your troops. You fight to win. This leader need not be you, Rand. It should not be you. I won't have this battle turn into a tangle, Moraine, he said. If you could see the mistakes we made last time, the confusion that can result when everyone thinks they are in control. Battle is turmoil, but we still need an ultimate commander to make decisions, to hold everything together. What of the White Tower? Ramonda asked, stepping, half shoving, her way up beside Egwene. We have the resources for efficient travel between battlefronts. We are cool-headed in times that would crush others, and we are trusted by all nations. That last bit prompted a raised eyebrow from Darlin. The White Tower does seem the optimal choice, Lord Dragon, Tenobia added. No, Rand said. The Amaran is many things, but a leader of war? I do not think it is a wise choice. Egwene, oddly, said nothing. Perrin studied her. He'd have thought that she'd jump at the chance to lead the war herself. It should be one of us, Darlin said, chosen from those who would go to battle here. I suppose, Rand said. So long as you all know who is in command, I will cede this point. You must meet my other demands, however. You still insist that you must break the seals? Egwene said. Do not worry, Egwene, Moraine said, smiling. He is not going to break the seals. Rand's face darkened. Egwene smiled. You are going to break them, Moraine said to Egwene. What? Of course I'm not. You are the watcher of the seals, Mother, Moraine said. Did you not hear what I said earlier? It shall come to pass that what men made shall be shattered, and the shadow shall lie across the pattern of the age, and the Dark One shall once more lay his hand upon the world of man? It must happen. Egwene seemed troubled. You have seen this, have you not? Moraine whispered. What have you dreamed, Mother? Egwene didn't respond at first. What did you see? Moraine pressed, stepping closer to her. His feet crunching, Egwene said, staring Moraine in the eyes. As he strode forward, Rand's feet stepped on the shards of the Dark One's prison. I saw him in another dream, hacking away at it to open it. But I never actually saw him opening it, Moraine. The shards were there, Mother, Moraine said. The seals had been broken. Dreams are subject to interpretation. You know the truth of this one. It does need to be done, and the seals are yours. You will break them when the time is right. Rand, Lord Dragon Reborn, it is time to give them to her. I don't like this, Moraine, he said. Then not much has changed, has it? She asked lightly. I believe you have often resisted doing what you are supposed to, particularly when I am the one to point it out to you. He paused for a moment, then laughed, reaching into the pocket of his coat. He slipped out 3 discs of Quendiar, each split by a sinuous line down the center. He set them on the table. How will she know the time? He asked. She will, Moraine said. Egwene smelled skeptical, and Perrin didn't blame her. Moraine always had believed in following the weave of the pattern and bowing to the wheel's turnings. Perrin didn't see it that way. He figured you made your own path and trusted in your own arms to do what needed to be done. The pattern wasn't a thing to depend on. Egwene was Aes Sedai. It seemed that she felt she should see it as Moraine did. Either that, or she was willing to agree and just take those seals into her hands. "I'll break them when I feel it must be done," she said, taking the seals. "You'll sign them?" Rand took the document as the clerks protested the hastiness with which they'd had to work. It now had several additions on the back. One of the clerks cried out, reaching for the sand, but Rand did something with the one power, drying the ink instantly as he placed the document before Egwene. "I will," she said, holding out a hand for a pen. She read the provisions carefully, the other sisters looking over her shoulders. They nodded, one at a time. Egwene put pen to paper. "And now the rest," Rand said, turning to measure reactions. "Right, but he's grown clever," Fael whispered beside Perrin. "Do you realize what he did?" "What?" Perrin said, scratching his beard. "He brought with him all he knew would support him," Fael whispered. "The Borderlanders who would sign practically anything to garner help for their homelands. Arad Doman, which he helped most recently. The
She's
Aiel,
almost done.
well, all right, who knows what the Aiel will do at a given time, but the idea stands. Then he let Egwene gather the others. It's genius, Perrin. That way, with her bringing this coalition against him, all he really had to do was convince her. Once he swayed her to his side, the others would look foolish to stand apart." Indeed, as the rulers began to sign, Barrelane going first and most eagerly, those who had supported Egwene started to fidget. Darlin stepped up and took the pen. He hesitated for a moment, then signed. Rigoran followed, then the Borderlanders, each in turn followed by the king of Arad Doman. Even Roedran, who still seemed to find this entire thing a fiasco, signed. Perrin found that curious. "He blusters a lot," Perrin said to Fael, "but he knows this is good for his kingdom." "Yes," she said. "He's been acting a buffoon partially to throw everyone off, make them dismiss him. The document outlines current borders of nations to remain as they are," Fael said. "That's a huge boon to someone trying to stabilize his rule. But, the Shan-Chen?" Fael said softly. "If Rand persuades them, does that allow them to keep the countries they have now? The women who are Damani? Are they allowed to slap one of those collars on any woman who passes their border?" The tent stilled. Perhaps Fael had spoken more loudly than she'd intended. Perrin sometimes had trouble remembering what ordinary people could and couldn't hear. "I will deal with the Shan-Chan," Rand said. He stood over the table, watching as each ruler looked over the document, spoke with the counselors they'd brought, then signed. "How?" Darlin asked. "They do not wish to make peace with you, Lord Dragon. I do think they'll make this document meaningless." "Once we are done here," Rand said softly, "I will go to them. They will sign." "And if they do not?" Rigoran demanded. Rand rested his hand on the table, fingers spread. "I may have to destroy them, or at least their ability to make war in the near future." The pavilion grew still. "Could you do that?" Darlin asked. "I'm not certain," Rand admitted. "If I can, it may leave me weakened in a time when I need all of my strength. Lighter may be my only choice. A terrible choice. When I left them last time, we cannot have them striking at our backs while we fight the shadow." He shook his head, and Min stepped up to take his arm. "I will find a way to deal with them. Somehow I'll find a way." The signing progressed. Some did it with great flourish, others in more casual fashion. Rand had Perrin, Gawain, Fael, and Garth Bryn sign as well. He seemed to want anyone here who might rise to a position of leadership to have their names on the document. Finally, only Elaine remained. Rand held out the quill to her. "This is a difficult thing you ask of me, Rand. Elaine said, arms folded, golden hair gleaming in the light of his globes. Why had the sky gone dim outside? Rand didn't seem worried, but Perrin feared that the clouds had consumed the sky. A dangerous sign, if they now held sway where Rand had once kept them back. I know it is difficult, Rand said. Perhaps if I gave you something in return? What? The war, Rand said. He turned to the rulers. You wanted one of you to lead the last battle. Will you accept Andor and its queen in this role? Too young, Darlin said. Too new. No offense, Your Majesty. Al-Salam snorted. You're one to talk, Darlin. Half the monarchs present have held their thrones for a year or less. What of the Borderlanders? Alejandra asked. They fought against the Blight all of their lives. We are overrun, Pytar said. He shook his head. One of us cannot coordinate this. Andor is as good a choice as any. Andor is suffering an invasion of its own, Darlin noted. You all are, or soon will be, Rand said. Elaine Trakand is a leader to her core. She taught me much of what I know about leadership. She has learned tactics from a great captain, and I'm certain she will rely upon all the great captains for advice. Someone must lead. Will you all accept her in this position? The others reluctantly nodded agreement. Rand turned to Elaine. All right, Rand, she said. I'll do this, and I will sign. But you had better find a way to deal with the Shonchan. I want to see their ruler's name on this document. None of us will be safe until it's there. What of the women held by the Shonchan? Ruark asked. I will admit, Randall Thor, our intention was to declare a blood feud with these invaders the moment more pressing battles were won. If their ruler signs it, Rand said, I will ask about trading for goods to retrieve those channelers they have stolen. I will try to persuade them to release the lands they hold and return to their own country. What if they refuse? Egwene asked, shaking her head. Will you let them sign it without giving on those points? Thousands are enslaved, Rand. We cannot defeat them, Avienda said, speaking softly. Perrin eyed her. She smelled frustrated but determined. If we go to war with them, we will fall. Avienda is right, Amis said. The Aiel will not fight the Shonchan. Ruark, startled, looked back and forth between the two. They have done horrible things, Rand said, but so far the lands they have taken have benefited from strong leadership. If forced to it, I am content to allow them the lands they have so long as they do not spread further. As for the women, what is done is done. Let us worry about the world itself first, then do what we can for those held captive. Elaine held the document for a moment, perhaps for the drama of it, then bent down and added her name to the bottom with a flourish. It is done, Moraine said as Rand picked up the document. You will have peace this time, Lord Dragon. We must survive first, he said, holding the document with reverence. I will leave you to make your battle preparations. I need to complete some tasks, Shonchan included, before I travel to Sheol. I do have a request for you, however. There is a dear friend who needs us. Angry lightning blistered the clouded sky. Despite the shade, sweat lined Lan's neck, matting his hair underneath his helmet. He'd not worn one in years. Much of his time with Moraine had required them to be nondescript, and helmets were anything but. How bad is it? Andir grimaced, holding his side and leaning back against a rock. Lan looked to the battle. The shadow spawn were amassing again. The monsters almost seemed to blend and shift together, one enormous dark force of howling, miasmic hatred, as thick as the air, which seemed to hold in the heat and the humidity like a merchant hoarding fine rugs. "It's bad," Lan said. "Knew it would be," Andir said, breathing in and out quickly, blood seeping between his fingers. "Nezzer?" "Gone," Lan said. The white-haired man had gone down in the same settee that had nearly taken Andir. Lan's rescue had not been quick enough. I saw him gut a Trolloc as it killed him. "May the last embrace of the mother," Andir spasmed in pain. May the last embrace of the mother welcome you home," Lan said softly. "Don't look at me that way, Lan," Andir said. "We all knew what this was going to be when we joined you. That is why I tried to stop you." Andir scowled. "Peace, Andir," Lan said, rising. "What I wished was selfish. I came to die for Melkir. I have no right to deny that privilege to others." "Lord Mandragoran!" Prince Kaisel rode up, his once fine armor blood-stained and dented. The Kandori prince still looked too young for this battle, but he'd proven himself to be as cool-headed as any grizzled veteran. "They're forming up again." Lan walked across the rocky ground to where a groom held Mandarb. The black stallion bore cuts on his flanks from Trolloc weapons. Thank the light they were superficial. Lan rested a hand on the horse's neck as Mandarb snorted. Nearby, his standard-bearer, a bald man named Jofel, raised the flag of Melkir, the Golden Crane. This was his 5th standard-bearer since yesterday. Lan's forces had seized the gap with their initial charge, shoving the Shadowspawn back before they were able to emerge into the valley. That was more than Lan had expected. The gap was a long, narrow piece of rocky ground nestled between craggy rises and peaks. Holding this position required nothing clever. You stood, you died, and you killed, as long as you could. Lan commanded a cavalry. It wasn't ideal for this kind of work. Cavalries did best where they could spread out and had room to charge. But the passage through Tarwin's Gap was narrow enough that only a small number of Trollocs could come through at once. That gave Lan a chance. At least it was more difficult for the Trollocs to take advantage of their superior numbers. They would have to pay a butcher's bill for every yard they gained. Trolloc carcasses had formed an almost fur-like blanket leading through the canyon. Each time the creatures tried to push through the gorge, Lan's men had resisted them with lances and polearms, swords and arrows, eventually slaughtering thousands and leaving them heaped for their fellows to climb over. But each clash similarly reduced Lan's numbers. Each assault forced his men to withdraw a little farther, toward the mouth of the gap. They were less than 100 feet from it now. Lan felt the fatigue pressing deep into his bones. "Our forces?" Lan asked Prince Kaisel. "Maybe 6,000 still able to ride Daishan?" Less than half of what they'd started with the day before. "Tell them to mount up." Kaisel looked shocked. "We're going to retreat?" Lan turned to the lad. Kaisel paled. Lan had been told that his gaze could unnerve any man. Moraine had liked to joke that he could outstare rocks and had the patience of an oak. Well, he didn't feel as sure of himself as people thought, but this boy should have known better than to ask if they were retreating. "Of course," Lan said. "And then we're going to attack." "Attack?" Kaisel said. "We're on the defensive." "They'll sweep us out," Lan said, pulling himself into Mandarb's saddle. "We're exhausted, worn out, and nearly broken. If we stand here and let them come at us again, we'll fall without a whimper." Lan knew an ending when he saw one. "Pass the orders," Lan said to Prince Kaisel. "We will slowly pull out of the pass. You have the rest of the troops assemble on the plain, mounted and ready to attack the Shadowspawn as they come out of the gap. A charge will do great damage. They won't know what hit them." "Won't we be surrounded and overrun if we leave the pass?" Kaisel asked. "This is the best we can do with the resources we have." And then? And then they eventually break through, slice our force into pieces, and overrun us. Kaisel sat for a moment, then nodded. Again, Lan was impressed. He'd assumed this boy had come with him to find the glory of battle, to fight at the side of Daishan and sweep their enemies away. But no, Kaisel was a borderlander to the core. He hadn't come for glory. He'd come because he'd had to. Good lad. Give the order now. The men will be glad to get back on their horses again. Too many of them had been forced to fight on foot because of the lack of maneuverability in the narrow confines. Kaisel gave the orders, and those orders burned through Lan's men like an autumn fire. Lan saw Andir being helped into his saddle by Bulin. Andir, Lan said, heeling Mandar toward him. You are in no condition to ride. Go join the wounded at the back camp. So I lie back there and let the Trollocs butcher me after finishing you lot? Andir leaned forward in the saddle, teetering slightly, and Bulin looked up with concern. Andir waved him off and forced himself upright. We've already moved the mountain, Lan. Let's budge this feather and be through with it. Lan could offer no argument. He called the retreat to the men ahead of him in the pass. His remaining men bunched around him, slowly backing out toward the plain. The Trollocs hooted and yelled in excitement. They knew that once they were free of the walls that restricted their movement, they would win this fight easily. Lan and his small force left the narrow confines of the gap, those on foot running toward their horses tethered near the mouth of the canyon. The Trollocs, for once, needed no push from the Murdral to charge. Their footfalls were a low rumble on the stony ground. Several hundred yards out of the gap, Lan slowed Mandarb and turned. Andir brought his horse up beside Lan's with difficulty, and they were joined by the other riders, who formed long lines of cavalry. Bulin cantered up to the other side of Lan. The storm of shadow spawn neared the mouth of the gap, a charging force of thousands of Trollocs that would soon burst out into the open and try to consume them. Lan's forces were silently lined up around him. Many were old men, the last remnants of their fallen kingdom. This force that had managed to plug the narrow gap now seemed tiny on the much larger plain. Bulin, Lan said. Yes, Lord Mandragoran. You claim to have failed me years ago. Yes, my lord. Any failing on your part is forgotten, Lan said, eyes forward. I am proud to have given you your authority.
Cake.
Kaisel rode up, nodding to Lan. We are ready, Daishan. This is for the best, Andir said, grimacing, still holding to his wound, barely able to remain in the saddle. It is what must be, Lan said. Not an argument. Not exactly. No, Andir said. It is more than that, Lan. Nalkir is like a tree that lost its roots to whiteworms, the branches withering slowly. I'd rather be burned away in a flash. I'd rather charge, Bulin said, voice growing firm. I'd rather charge now than let them overrun us. Let us die on the attack, with swords pointed home. Lan nodded, turning and raising his sword high above his head. He gave no speeches. He had given those already. The men knew what this was. One more charge, while they still had some strength, would mean something. Fewer shadow spawn to flood into civilized lands. Fewer Trollocs to kill those who could not fight back. The enemy seemed endless. A slavering, rampaging horde without battle line or discipline. Anger. Destruction incarnate. Thousands upon thousands of them. They came forward like floodwaters suddenly released, surging out of the canyon. Lan's little force was but a pebble before them. The men silently raised their swords to him, the final salute. No! Lan yelled. Now as they begin to spread out, it will do the most damage. Lan kicked Mandarb forward, leading the way. Andir galloped beside Lan, clinging to his pommel with both hands. He didn't try to raise a weapon. He'd have fallen from his saddle if he had. Nynaeve was too far away for Lan to feel much of her through the bond, but sometimes very powerful emotions could stand out despite the distance. He tried to project confidence in case it reached her, pride in his men, love for her. He wished deeply for those to be the last things she remembered of him. My arm will be the sword. Hooves clattered on the ground. The Trollocs ahead hooted in delight, realizing that their prey had transformed a retreat into a charge of men rushing right into their grasp. My breast itself a shield. Lan could hear a voice, his father's voice, speaking these words. That was foolish, of course. Lan had been a baby when Malkir had fallen. To defend the Seven Towers. He had never seen the Seven Towers stand against the Blight. He'd only heard stories. To hold back the darkness. The horse's hooves were becoming a thunder. So loud, louder than he'd have thought possible. He held himself straight, sword out. I will stand when all others fall.
Nice.
The oncoming Trollocs leveled spears as the distance between the two opposing forces
one
narrowed.
I got from
I'll Talid Olara
local
Malkir.
dispos.
For my sweet
Oh,
land,
grammar.
Malkir. It was the oath a Malkieri soldier took during his first posting to the border. Lan had never spoken it. He did so now in his heart. Al Talid Olara Malkir. Lan screamed. Lancers, set! Like the beats were loud. Could 6,000 make so much noise? He turned to look at those behind him. At least 10,000 rode there. What? He pressed Mandar forward through his surprise. Forward, the Golden Crane! Voices, shouts, screams of power and joy. The air ahead to the left split with a sudden vertical slash. A gateway 36 paces wide, as large as Lan had ever seen, opened as if into the sun itself. From the other side, the brightness spilled out, exploded out. Charging men in full armor burst from the gateway, falling into place at Lan's flank. They flew the flag of Arafel. More gateways, 3, then 4, then a dozen. Each broke the field in coordination. Charging horsemen bursting forth with lances leveled, flying the flags of Saldeia, Shinar, Kandor. In seconds, his charge of 6,000 had become 100,000. Trollocs in the front lines screamed, and some of them stopped running. Some held steady, spears angled to impale oncoming horses. Bunching up behind them, not being able to see clearly what was happening in front, other enraged hordes pushed eagerly forward, waving large swords with scythe-like blades and double-bitted battle axes. Those Trollocs at the front, holding spears, exploded. From somewhere behind Lan, Ashaman began to send weaves to rip the earth, completely destroying the front ranks of Trollocs. As the carcasses collapsed to the ground, the middle ranks found themselves completely exposed, facing a storm of hooves, swords, and lances. Lan hit, swinging, crashing Mandarb through the snarling Trollocs. Andir was laughing. Back, you fool! Lan yelled to him as he lashed out at the nearby Trollocs. Direct the Ashaman to our wounded. Have them protect the camp. I want to see you smile, Lan, Andir shouted, clinging to his horse's saddle. Show more emotion than a stone for once. Surely this deserves it. Lan looked at the battle he'd never thought to win, seeing a last stand instead become a promising fight. He couldn't help himself. He didn't just smile. He laughed. Andir obeyed his order, riding off to seek healing and organize the back lines. Jofel, Lan called. Raise my banner high. Malkir lives on this day.
Chapter 7. Into the thick of it. Elaine stepped out of the pavilion after the meeting and entered a grove of a dozen or so trees. And not just any trees. They were towering, healthy, huge-limbed, beautiful trees, hundreds of feet tall with massive trunks. The way she froze and gaped would have been embarrassing if everyone else hadn't been doing the same. She looked to the side, where Egwene stood, mouth open, as she stared up into the huge trees. The sun still shone above, but the green leaves shaded the area, explaining why the light had dimmed inside the tent. "These trees," Perrin said, stepping forward and resting his hand on the thick-ribbed bark. "I've seen great trees like this before, inside a steading." Elaine embraced the source. The glow of Saidar was there, a warmth alongside that of the sun. She breathed in the power, and was amused to notice that most of the women who could channel had done as she had, the moment a steading was mentioned. "Well, whatever Rand is now," Egwene said, folding her arms, "he can't just make steadings here." She seemed to find the thought comforting. "Where did he go?" Elaine asked. "He strolled out there," Perrin said, waving toward the trees, "and vanished." People were walking among the massive trunks, soldiers from the various camps staring upward. She heard a Shinaran talking to Lord Agomar close by. "We watched them grow, my lord. They burst from the ground. It took less than 5 minutes for them to become so tall. I swear it, my lord, or I may never draw blade again." "All right," Elaine said, releasing the source. "Let's begin. Nations are burning. Map."
Alright, everyone. I'm going to call Into This Life for tonight. I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who continues to stop by. I appreciate all y'all's support. You got to get up a little early tomorrow. Me and Most Hated are going to go out and do a little fishing. But until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe.